Good evening and welcome to Money Matters TV. I'm Brian Kohute, your host. My co-host, Jane Scaccetti from Drucker and Scaccetti. We have a special guest, Christine Bona Lobley from Fred's Footsteps. She's executive director. We have an exciting show, Jane.
Yeah.
I think we're going to talk about foundations and gifting. So I guess starting that out, there seems to be a lot of confusion about gifting. People think when you make a gift, it's taxable. I know you're a tax specialist. So what are some of the questions you get from your clients about gifting? And for some reason, they always think that when you give something, it's taxable to the recipient.
Or deductible to them, right?
Right, or more importantly, deductible to them.
Can I take a deduction?
Right, exactly.
So gifting is really the transfer of wealth, and it's really ruled by estate taxation and gift taxation, not income taxation. So generally, when you give a gift to someone else, it is not taxable income to them, nor is it a deduction to you. And that's, I said generally, but that's really the rule. It's
Right.
not taxable income and it's not a deduction to you. Gifts can be to individuals, in which case there is usually a donor's intent to provide the gift out of the goodness of their heart, or something that they're doing that has sort of a family or friendship kind of connotation to it. Gifts to qualified charities are usually called charitable donations, but a lot of people will say they're gifting to a charity. Slightly different. A gift to a charity does have income tax ramifications, and generally you can take a deduction on your tax return for a gift to a qualified 501c3, which is just the Internal Revenue Code that defines what kind of organization it is, tax-free organization that meets certain rules. So most charities that we recognize, universities and high schools that are not-for-profits, health systems and hospitals, and many other charities, one of which we'll talk about today, you would get a tax deduction if you gave to that charity. But if you gave a gift to your child, you would not get a tax deduction, or a gift to a relative, or a gift to anyone where the donor intent is either because of a family or a friendship.
Great. And I think people get confused because there's a thing called a gift tax out there, which is not income tax driven, right? It has more to do with
estate tax. Yeah. So really, gift tax is just the mirror of an estate tax. So either you die with your wealth and you pay an estate tax when you die, or you gift it and you pay an estate tax when you gift it. But there are many, many rules around that. So you can gift up to $14,000 per donor to a donee. So I could give $14,000 to you, I can give $14,000 to each of your children, I can give $14,000 to my doctor, whoever I want, as long as my intent.
I'll take mine in cash at the end.
Right, I'll see what I can do. As long as the intent is truly that it's for a friendship or a gift from your heart, and you would pay no gift tax. Now, there's some requirements on that. It has to be a current gift. As you said, you take it in cash. So it can't be a promise to pay you sometime in the future. And those things they're more complicated, but they really deal with when you gift to a trust and whether that trust can gift to the beneficiary immediately or be delayed. But generally, you can gift up to your unified credit in excess of the $14,000 per donee. But again, if you exceed that, it's not income tax rates that apply, they're estate tax rates, which are pretty steep. Right. They get up there pretty quick to a maximum of 35, I think, %.
Yeah, pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, they do. It's a quick rise.
And I guess one of the benefits if you live in Pennsylvania is by gifting it, you avoid the inheritance tax at the state level.
You do if you gift it earlier. Well, and even with the $14,000,
right,
if you gift, you're reducing your estate. So if your estate should be over the $5 million, which sometimes with a lot of property and values of real estate can escalate, then gifting getting into a gifting program and gifting often. And the other things are, where do you gift? So in Pennsylvania, if you gift to a 529 plan, which is a qualified education plan for higher education for the donee, Pennsylvania actually gives you a deduction for that. So you could save little over 3% of Pennsylvania income tax for that kind of gift. But generally that gift would not be tax deductible the way most people are thinking about it for federal.
I get a lot of questions. Clients have stock they've owned for a long, long time with a big tax cost. and they always want to gift that. Is there an advantage to do that?
To gift to a family member now you're talking about, or to a charity?
I guess, if a client was asking, what would you recommend?
So to two different purposes here. Generally, a little bit of it depends. So if you're middle-aged and you have younger children and you've bought Apple and you have a tremendous gain in Apple and you're trying to make a gift to a child, depending on whether the kiddie tax will apply, you might gift it to someone who's in a lower income tax bracket than you are, because they take your carryover basis. So let's say you have a 21-year-old son, 22-year-old son, just started to work, his tax bracket's in the 20-25%, but your tax bracket is in the 40%. Even at capital gains rates, his tax rate might be at a 15% versus yours at 20%. Perhaps gifting the Apple stock and letting your son then use your basis, sell it, recognize the gain, might save some tax dollars. So that's one way. If you're elderly and you think that you'll continue to hold the stock and you might die, you get a step up in basis by owning the stock at your date of death. If you gifted it the day before you died, then that gain is still taxed to your beneficiaries. So it just depends. You have to think through what you're doing, who you're doing it to. For charities, it's a completely different factor, and this is, just a wonderful tax saving planning device that's used by many, many people. So again, if you bought Apple stock and you have a huge gain in that Apple stock, if you gift it to a qualified charity, you take a deduction equal to the fair market value of the stock on the day you donate it. Now, there are some limitations. It's limited to 30% of your adjusted gross income, and you just have to, and that usually isn't a limitation, but the gain is never recognized. So you eliminate having to recognize the gain. So if you just play with some numbers, if you made a gift of $100 to the charity, but it had a gain in there of $50, that $50 gain, you never pay tax on it, which at 20% might be $10, right? So instead of having 90, if you sold the stock and wanted to contribute it after you paid your taxes, you can contribute the full 100, get the $100 deduction, and never pay the tax on the gain. So that's the best way. And sometimes what we do with individuals is we set up what we think the charitable donation might be for that year, how much they want to donate. We talk to their investment advisor like you, and we say, look, when you're starting to sell a mutual fund or you want to rebalance the portfolio and there are gains in that portfolio, rather than sell it or rebalance it directly, let us know, because we'd like to make $25,000 in gifting this year to charitable organizations, and we'd like to do it with the appreciated securities that we have, and that includes mutual funds, bonds, et cetera. So with just a little bit of planning, you avoid having to pay tax on that gain.
Yeah, that's great. Does that same rule apply to if a client sets up a private foundation and they gift appreciated stock into that private foundation?
It does. The only difference is that you're limited to 20% of your adjusted gross income. So you can't gift away more than 20% of your adjusted gross income and take the deduction currently, but that deduction carries forward for 5 years. So it does give you some flexibility. But anytime you donate appreciated securities, and appreciated security rules are the same as if you have appreciated art and other things. It's just that with marketable securities, the market price is set by the market. When you gift a piece of art or antique or oriental rugs or anything like that, you need an appraisal, especially if it's over the $5,000 mark.
Do you see a lot of clients setting up private foundations, or they prefer to deal with the already established ones? And I guess it comes down to control a little bit.
So, I have a lot of clients that have private foundations, and I was a big believer in them. I'm a believer in them because I represent a lot of family-owned businesses, and what it does is it brings the family together. And you can use it as a tool to talk about charitable giving and the fundamental belief of the family as to what their community involvement may be financially and how they would contribute. And so we have clients who once a year will put together just a little slide presentation. Here's how much money we have, here's what we've done, here are the charities we've been supporting, and then solicit information from family members as to what they want to support. Family members might contribute, though usually the matriarch or patriarch is the main fundraiser. So those kind of foundations have some real advantages. You could, if a child is actually working in the foundation and doing something valuable, pay a limited salary. It's a much lower salary than you would pay. You can't take advantage of that. So a private foundation has some flexibility. But generally today, if you can't get somewhere between that $3 and $4 million mark pretty quickly in the private foundation, the cost of the compliance to create the foundation, you either have to have a corporation or a trust, you have to have bylaws, you have to have approval, you have a tax return that's due every year for the foundation. So the compliance cost can be high. So as an alternative, you can donate to what is called a donor advised fund. And that's when an organization like you or Vanguard or your bank will open up an account. They do all the compliance and back office for you. You still get the deduction for donating to them. They are your trustees and therefore will make contributions from the donor advised fund to the charity at your direction. And when you fund the donor advised fund, that year is the year in which you take the charitable donation. You can fund it with appreciated securities as well. So depending on the intent, you have to look to see whether or not a private foundation makes sense or a donor advised fund makes sense. The second advantage to the donor advised fund and the foundation is just practical, right? So if you have a high tax year and you have big bonuses, or you have you have exercised stock options, or you have some reason that this one year your taxable income is much higher and you're in a much higher tax bracket, maybe you want to give money to a donor advised fund or your private foundation to cover 3 or 4 years worth of your charitable giving. If you gave it all to the charity, they'd be really, really happy the first year, and they kind of tend to forget about it year 2, 3, and 4.
Right.
So it's sometimes nice to be able to space that out over a period of time, still get your deduction in the year you want it, but then to sprinkle it to the charity over a period of years.
Yeah, that's what I usually find. Clients don't think of it. It's almost an afterthought. They don't think of gifting as an income tax strategy that they should think in advance, because a lot of them are charitable, and they're just kind of used to writing those checks and not thinking it through of what's the most efficient way to gift.
Brian, so many times I'll review a tax return and I'll see a lot of capital gains, and then I'll see a lot of charitable giving. And they give the charity in cash, and when I call them up and say, okay, here's what you could have saved.
I sold the stock to give it.
Right, and a lot of people sell mutual funds, so they don't think of it in terms of that, and they're rebalancing a portfolio. So they really need to work with their tax professional and their investment advisory firm, so that you say, look, here's the plan, here's what we're going to try and do. During the year, when you're trying to rebalance a portfolio, or you think a gain, you want to take the risk off the table, maybe that's the stock we use, or that's the mutual fund we use to make the donation.
I have one last question kind of on this. Do you think people got lazy on the estate planning because of this big exemption amount now, where people are thinking, oh, I don't even have to bother with it, it's $10 million between me and my spouse?
Yeah, I'm sure that's some of it, but estate planning is more than just estate tax. And usually when I say to my clients, are you prepared for whatever wealth you've accumulated to pass it on to your children, and are you confident that they know what to do with it? And in most cases they go, well, no, I hadn't thought about that. Okay, so maybe that's the estate planning, right? It's not so much for estate tax purposes or federal estate tax purposes, but it is for making sure that your children can be good stewards of the estate that you just created. So how do we protect that estate? So shouldn't we have in the will, whether Johnny gets it outright and Jamie doesn't, or whether it's in a trust, and is it in a trust that is somewhat perpetual, or is it in a trust that dissolves at age 45 when they're going through a divorce?
Great. You touched on 529 plans. Do you have time for a question?
I do.
Alicia Walters from Philadelphia asked, what's the best tax efficient way to give money to a grandchild for college?
So a grandchild for college, so there's 2 ways. One, if you contribute to a 529 plan, Pennsylvania will allow you to take the deduction for the amount that you contribute to the 529 plan. So that's a little bit of a benefit, a little over 3% of tax savings. If you give to a 529 plan, that 529 plan to a grandchild who's young has all the years that it can grow and appreciate by investing in things you tell them to invest in, and it doesn't pay tax on that appreciation. When the grandchild is ready for college, you could either use those funds, but if you had other funds that you wanted to use and you had another member of the family or someone else that you would rather pass that 529 plan to, it's flexible, and you can now name that 529 plan for another grandchild or a niece or a nephew. The other way is, as a grandparent, that gifting, that $14,000 exemption we talked about earlier, if you gift directly for education, if you pay the tuition, not, you write the check not to the child, but right to the college, then it doesn't count towards your annual exclusion for gift tax purposes. So a little bit depends on whether you're trying to save income tax, when you say what's the best efficiency for tax, or trying to save maybe estate tax or gift tax.
Great answer. If you have a question, here's how you send it to Money Matters TV.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says, Send us your questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, M-O-N-E-Y, -matters, M-A-T-T-E-R-S, TV.com.
Welcome back. It's time to introduce our special guest, Christine Bona Lobley, Executive Director of Fred's Footsteps. Welcome.
Thank you.
I guess first off, tell us about your organization, how you founded, your story a little bit.
So we founded Fred's Footsteps 10 years ago. My father was G. Fred Bona Jr. He was the president and CEO of Independence Blue Cross, and he passed away at age 53 from kidney cancer. And in those days following his death, what our family found was that so many people were coming to us and telling us stories about how he offered a word of encouragement or showed them some sort of kindness that they had carried with them for a long time. And a lot of people were saying they wanted to give in his honor. So we decided to start Fred's Footsteps to keep his memory alive, and also to help the community in the ways that he helped the community when he was alive. We knew at the time that we wanted to combine his two biggest passions for children and healthcare. So we set our mission to help working families in the Philadelphia community and 16 counties surrounding Philadelphia, New Jersey, and Delaware, to help working families through a child's illness. And basically to help them stay on their feet during that time and show them the kindness that he showed to so many people, and enable them to work through their child's illness and not be in complete financial ruins when they come out the other side of it.
That's great.
So Chris, I'm familiar with the charity. It's amazing that it's almost a safety net for a group that really has no other avenue to go to. Explain a little bit about the kinds of families that you try and help.
And that's exactly what, when we started the organization and thought about what we wanted to do, those were the kinds of people that we wanted to help. My dad always loved people who were just hard workers and down on their luck. So those are the people that we work with. And what we found is that they've contributed to society their entire lives, and they've worked hard. And then when they hit a point where they need some help, many other organizations or the government aren't there for them, and they made too much money, or they fall into a higher income bracket. So what we're really trying to do is help them avoid getting to the point where they do qualify for that type of government assistance, and their home is in foreclosure and they do qualify for the programs, because we'd rather that they stay above water during that time and go back to their lives the way they were before.
You had told me a story once of where one of your families knew they needed to downsize. They knew
Yes.
they had two working parents. A child had gotten very sick. It was a chronic sickness that they needed to take care of. One parent would have to come out of the workforce. They knew they had to downsize, but they couldn't sell their home.
Yes, they were falling quickly behind on their bills. Their daughter was probably about a year old, and they knew that mom was not going to be able to go into the workforce. And they had started to plan for that, but at the same time, the mortgage was piling up, and they wanted to get out from under their house at that time instead of having it foreclosed on. So we helped them to pay their mortgage while they had the house on the market, and they were able to get a good price for it and get into more affordable housing so that they didn't have this lifelong cycle of debt and a foreclosure on their
Right.
on their credit forever. And they got into something that's more affordable and got into their new normal.
Right.
How do you find the people, or do they find you?
So we have relationships with the area hospitals, CHOP and DuPont, and lots of other children's hospitals, and their social workers there have a great relationship with us and refer families into the program. So they'll let us know that a great family needs some assistance, and the family, along with their social worker, will put in an application. And we have an incredibly qualified grant advisory committee that goes through those applications and looks at the best ways to help those families. And sometimes it even means more than they asked for. We'll see
Right.
an application and they'll ask. They're really just great people who don't want to take advantage, but will say they're asking for 1 month of rent and they could really use 2.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really a great surprise to them that somebody recognized that their needs are even higher than they
Right.
humbly asked for.
I mean, that must be a hard job, right? I'm sure all the stories are very sad. How did they decide, who gets help and?
All the stories are very sad, and we've been in a great position to really be able to help. I would say almost 100% of the applications that qualify for assistance. So one of the big things we look at is the financial stress related to the child's illness.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really the biggest judgment factor there is it other factors, or is it really the child's illness, and can the funding that we give them make a difference? One of the things that we decided early on was that we were going to help less families but with a larger dollar amount. So we help families for up to 1 year or up to $10,000. And we just really wanted to be able to make a deeper impact on families. But we've been in a great situation and have a really great donor base, so that we have been able to fund most of the families that come to us that qualify.
So talk about that. It's 10 years. There are a lot of charities that are started in the memory of really wonderful people. This charity not only has survived, but is flourishing. Talk about that success and the factors you see that led to that.
I think one of the biggest factors that led to that was that in the very beginning we put together our board of directors. We have a fabulous board of directors, and they're business people. And we really looked at it as they were passionate about what we were trying to do, and when we were forming the mission, they really felt passionate about the mission as well. But I think so many charities don't think about running their charity as a business, and especially small and medium-sized charities, because money is always tight and you're always looking for the next donation. But we really decided early on that we needed to run our organization like a business.
What are some examples of doing that?
So some examples of that are that we really invest in our infrastructure. We make sure that the decisions that we're making are not just current decisions for
So strategic planning.
Strategic planning. I think it's hard for a lot of organizations too, because you're thinking about cash flow, and we want to. When thinking about cash flow, it's easy for it to just go for the next grant that seems like the low-hanging fruit, even if you have to creep the mission a little bit. And we've been very cognizant that we're not going to do that and creep the mission, because that can sink the ship a lot of times. We also decided early on that we wanted to keep some of our money in the bank so that we didn't have to make decisions based on cash flow, and that we could really make the decisions that would be the most healthy decisions for our long-term success.
So you survived some turbulent financial markets in that
Yes.
10-year history. What do you see as the biggest challenges going forward for the foundation?
I think the biggest challenges going forward are, our society now it's very fast-paced, and particularly, the younger generation, information's very accessible, and they want updated information, and you only have a short period of time for a good impression. And I think it's really pressuring charities to spend more money on social media and website and technology. And I think those were things that traditionally had been looked down upon by donors, that there's always charities have to be so lean, which is true, and we all have to be good stewards of the donations that come in. But I think there has been a big switch to now where there's a little more forgiveness in charities to spend money to invest in themselves and their futures. And there was a great letter to the Donors of America from the Better Business Bureau, Charity Navigator, and GuideStar. And they were basically saying to the donor community, we know that we judge charities based on this overhead ratio, but sometimes it's a really hard standard for them to live up to, and there's lots of things that you need to look at when deciding to invest in a charity, and results and management and leadership, and they really wanted to correct that misconception that we're trying to make charities be so lean that we're starving them,
Right.
and it's more beneficial for them maybe not to be as lean and to invest in their future so that they can continue helping their constituents. So that's really been, I think, a positive change, so that charities can start to investing, especially small to medium size, because it's hard to compete with the larger charities who have bigger budgets for technology and communications and so on.
Yeah, I mean, the concept of return on invested capital should apply to any business. You should be a good steward of what you're doing with the money, both from a standpoint of helping others and investing. Absolutely. To be able to help them again. So,
yeah, and at Fred's Footsteps, we're really proud of our numbers, and we keep overhead costs as low as possible. But we also know that we need to invest in our future, because the most important thing is that when 10 years from now, when a child is diagnosed, that they'll have somewhere to turn.
So what is the future? What's it look like for Fred's Footsteps?
I think that the future is, really, really bright. We have a great donor base, a great board of directors, and what we're finding is there's really a new generation of people in this community that want to give to charities and want to be involved in different ways, and give their time and their connections, and just really look at new entrepreneurial ways to be involved with charities. So I think we're moving forward with trying to really engage those folks as well. And I think one of the other things for us and for a lot of other charities is we have a very generous business community here in Philadelphia, but they're asked by everyone and for money over and over again.
Unfortunately, we have to stop you there, but it's great what you do. We appreciate it. So thanks for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
Please join us next week for our guest, Richard Sitchell. He's the Chief Investment Officer of Philadelphia Trust Company. And as always, your money matters. Thank you.